Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 7th annual Tobie Awards for the year 2023. As always, I am Julian Mush. I am joined by Jeremy Cozier.
Hello.
And special guest, friend of the show, Vince Hussein. How are you?
Hello. Hi. I'm doing great and
Excellent.
Super stoked to be here.
Yeah, happy to have you, Vince. I mean, here's the story for those who might have been expecting Rachel, because that's who we had last year. The story is Rachel has had a kid last year, and because of that, has been really. She told me, she said, I've watched 3 movies this year, and one of them on repeat. Which turns out to be a kid's movie that the baby's been watching on repeat. So, she didn't really have much to add. So she did encourage us to go out and find someone to fill her spot. And by the way, this is in accordance with our new policy for the year 2024, which is that we are trying to expand our footprint a little bit, reach out to those who have either been on the show before or maybe who have never been on the show, and get them back into the fold. It's been a little bit too long. Vince, when's the last time you were on the show? It's been a while, right?
It was a very long time ago. I remember being at Jeremy's place, and I think we did. I think we either did a normal show or it might have been another Tobie show, actually.
I think there was
like
an
Tobie's
Oscars
one or
preview
something.
you were on. I feel like that's possible. I vaguely recall being in the Cayman Islands and recording an episode outside, which I had done a couple times there on the public Wi-Fi at this in this really nice part of town, but relatively quiet. So I remember recording episodes out there, and I recall you being on one of those episodes, and it might have been an Oscars preview show, and might be even one of our better ones if I'm remembering correctly. But you're right, it has been too long, so that's on me, Vince. So I apologize. It's good to have you back. So,
Yeah.
What is the format for today? The format is we are going to talk about recap, look back at the year 2023. And today is technically February 1st, so we're a little behind schedule, I guess, as it were. But that's really kind of par for the course these days at the Tower of Apple podcast. So we're going to again look back at year 2023. We're going to provide our top 3 favorite films and television shows, as well as some honorable mentions, some disappointments that we might have had, and talk about some of the trends that we might have noticed from the last year in the entertainment space, not just regular stuff. The world is falling apart. 2023 was the hottest year on record by a wide margin. There's lots of things to worry about, but we're not really going to worry about that right now, and we're just going to ignore all of the bad stuff and just talk about the things that we like, which are movies and TV, which is what we focus on here at the Tower of Babel podcast. So that is the plan. Before we get into the ceremonies, and of course this is a very prestigious ceremony that happens again. This is the 7th annual, which is really crazy to think about how we've been doing this long. But before we get into that, just a little bit of housekeeping to do. So Twitter and Facebook, at Tower Babelcast on Twitter and Facebook. That is where you can find us. In fact, I actually also recently got an invite to Blue Sky, so I'm going to be trying to develop a presence over there. I don't know how that's going to go. We'll see. But I can tell you this. It does remind me of old Twitter, and it's a much more enjoyable experience over there. A lot less crazies. So, and I do call it still Twitter because what else am I going to call it, really? X? Come on, that's silly. So that also the film club. We do a monthly film club every month. We actually just recorded yesterday. Jeremy and I did. We recorded an episode on the Iron Claw. Jeremy, would you say that we like that movie? How would you categorize our reaction or our takeaway from that film?
I think we like that movie. I think we really like that movie.
Yeah.
There was just some of it. The conversation was kind of tied to the Oscars a little bit, so it may have sounded a little
no noms,
just to justify that, I guess. But who knows?
Yeah, I guess it's funny because the nominations just came up to the Oscars, and that's the other thing you have to look forward to, which is our Oscars preview show, which I always get excited about. And unfortunately, this year that means there's 7 Best Picture movies that I have not yet seen, and I am not the most excited about this year's slate of movies to watch. I think last year I had seen 4 of the 10 already, and for whatever reason 6 feels much more approachable than 7. I don't know why that would be, but the other movies seemed interesting. There was a lot of cool movies from last year. Triangle of Sadness, for instance, was really awesome, fun ride, among others. But this year, gotta say, the Best Picture nominations feels like a little bit like the Oscar nominations from 10 years ago, where you would have never heard of a single one of them, and it's just I'm in tough. It's gonna be a slog. I feel like we'll see. They're supposed to be the best movies of the year, but often they can be quite boring. So we'll get into that eventually. Anyway, you can find our Iron Claw review as part of the film club that we do monthly at our Patreon, patreon.com/TowerBabbleCast. It's really cheap. It's $5 a month. You get access to that, plus a little bit of extra bonus content. I included some bonus content in this Iron Claw review as we talk a little bit more about the Oscars in the kind of post-show content there. So you can find that. That's exclusive to Patreon at patreon.com/TowerBabbleCast. Okay, so that is the all the housekeeping out of the way. Let's get into the fun stuff here. So this is the best of the year 2023, and we are going to talk about again our favorite films in television. Originally we started with our top. I think we tried to do top 10, but that was too many. We're not professional movie critics, therefore we don't have the time to see and think about 10. I could probably do 10 movies, to be honest, but by the back half of that list, you're going to get into some movies that probably don't belong on a top 10 list. So we pared it down to 5, and that was okay for a little while. But even then, that still felt like we were stretching it at times when we were into some of the drier years. So we said, you know what? Everyone does a top 10 or everyone does a top 5. Let's just do a top 3. Really focus on the best of the best. So that is really what we're going to do here. We're going to talk about the best of the best. Plus, we'll talk about some honorable mentions because it's hard to really only talk about 3 things. You got to add a few bonus pieces in there. We'll talk about anything that might have been a big disappointment. We're not saying it's the worst thing we saw. Certainly, we're not doing our worst or our version of the Razzies, whatever that would be. We're not doing that. We're doing something that disappointed us. We might have had a bit excited about and just didn't reach those heights. So that's also on the table for those who are interested. We'll start with television, then work our way through movies, and again, we'll weave in some conversation about some of the trends. And I have a list of about 6 or 7 trends that I noticed from this year that I feel like will tie in well with the conversation. So, are you guys excited about this, or should we get into it, or what?
Oh yeah, super ready.
Okay.
No
comment. God damn, Jeremy, come on. We're trying to get excited. These are the Tobies. You got to get excited. We went one time. We did wear a suit for this, so as you can see, we are recording this live on Twitch and YouTube.
I don't think I wore a suit.
You don't think so? I think you did.
No.
I think you maybe a tie, a jacket, maybe perhaps a shirt.
A jacket.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. I think that's fair. You're right. Either way, we dressed up at one point, and COVID really ruined the whole. I haven't gotten dressed up really since COVID, to be honest. Not really. I went to one wedding, and that's probably the only time since COVID that's happened. So it's kind of destroyed my ability to even think about putting a suit on. And besides, I mean, the new setup we have here at the new, Tower Studios doesn't really work for a stand-up event. So we'll just stick with the usual casual wear for this one. But again, prestigious. You got to remember that. Okay, so let's start with television. We will start with our third favorite, or we'll work backwards from 3 to 1. We'll mention some honorable mentions after we get through that list. If, for instance, your 3, Vince, is my 2 or Jeremy's 1, depending on how he wants to think about it, we'll just talk about that at that time. We're not going to wait to dive into a conversation on a certain thing. It doesn't make sense. So, with that being said, all the rules and the structure out of the way, Vince, why don't you kick us off? Your number 3 television show from the year 2023.
Yeah, it was Only Murders in the Building season 3. It was one of those shows where I got super excited to come home after, I think it was every Tuesday, and you can just sit on the couch.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and just have a glass of wine, watch a mystery show. And I felt like it did a good enough job tricking me. I'm pretty easy to trick, to make me not know who it was going to be for the entire season.
Yeah, they do a good job. I think, first of all, great pick, Vince, because I think Only Murders in the Building is a top tier show. In fact, I think they're coming back for a 4th season, even though they said they were only going to do 3. So, and Steve Martin has said that this is probably his last acting job. He's going to retire after this, and so the longer that they keep it going and the longer that they have Steve Martin working, the better. To be honest, he looks great for his age, and it feels like he could probably keep doing comedy for probably forever. But and personally, Steve Martin and Martin Short as obviously a long-time pairing, but Steve Martin specifically really hits my funny bone, and I don't feel like I recognized that for a really long time, but then when Only Murders came around, it just felt like he was so effortlessly hilarious all the time in that show, especially. And I've since gone back and watched things like Father of the Bride and other things that he's been in, and he's genuinely hilarious in those. And he was a little typecast for a while, always playing the dad of something, but because he's had white hair for forever. But I just love the show. You're right in the sense that it keeps you guessing, but it's it's not really about the mystery. Really, it's more about the characters. Obviously Steve Martin, Martin Short, and what's her name?
Selena Gomez. Mabel.
Yeah. Selena Gomez. First of all, I never really thought of her as an actress before, really. Even though she has been doing that for a long time, it never really came across my screen. And then here she just really, again, she plays the straight man, and she does such a good job of that, especially bouncing off of the wackiness of Steve Martin and Martin Short, that I think it totally works. They really struck gold with this show. The fact that it still feels novel in season 3 when the premise is a murder inside of apartment complex, and then there's now been 3 murders adjacent to the building, which does feel a little contrived, but it doesn't matter again because it's really just more about hanging out with these people, and that's what makes it. I struggled with putting that on my list. It's in my honorable mentions when it comes to the building season 3. It's really top tier stuff. Anything else you want to mention about Only Murders? Again, it's It's a great selection. So great selection.
Yeah, I think you hit it with the cast just working off each other so well, and it was really a star-studded season this year. This year too, with who they brought in, and yeah, it was it was really good. Really enjoyed it.
Great. Okay, so that's Ted Lasso. Or sorry, that's my pick for spoilers. My pick for number 3, Ted Lasso season 3. So we'll just jump into that then, and Jeremy, then we'll go to you. Ted Lasso season 3 is the finale for Ted Lasso. There may be a spin-off coming. If there is a sequel, it's certainly not in the works or been announced or anything like that. It wraps up and if you've been following kind of the R stuff for the last couple of years, you'll know that Ted Lasso has been in and or around my favorites every year that it's been around. The Ted Lasso season 1 was my favorite season of television when it premiered, I think, in 2019 or 2020. I don't remember exactly. I want to say 2019.
2020.
Thank you. And that first season is, I think, untouchable. It's such a perfect season of television. And not to talk about that because we're talking about season 3 here, but the second season was a little bit rockier. The episodes started getting longer. The character dynamics started to weave a little bit more, and for good or for bad. There is some really good stuff in season 2, but it's a little bit less. It's not perfect. It's a little bit bumpier. And then season 3 comes around, and it's like, okay, we got to tie this up. The episodes get even longer. We're talking hour-plus episodes in season 3, and the format of the show doesn't always fit really long episodes, but I feel like they really started to understand the wider cast, bigger than just Jason Sudeikis, and they really started to lean into some of these other characters that had so much potential, and it really paid off. And in droves, I think, but ultimately, it still felt a little bit bumpy. The finale is, I think, it's good. It's certainly not as good. I'll give you spoilers for season 2 or season 1 of Severance. Not this. Really, not spoilers. But the spoiler is that it had a great finale. That it might be the best season finale of any show I've ever seen. Obviously, a series finale is a different beast. You have a lot more you have to do. So, I think they largely do enough to achieve what they're trying to get, done. But it doesn't. The finale itself doesn't leave me blown away. I still think, when I still think of Ted Lasso, I still think of season 1. There's certainly moments from throughout the series that bubble up for me. It's still a show about optimism and being a better person and how you perceive the world and how you can influence the world around you and the people around you for the better. And so that all works for me still, but I had to be included here because it's one of my favorite shows of all time. It's just profoundly great, and emotionally it just strikes me in just wherever I'm weakest in my heartstrings, it plucks those areas, and it has done so consistently throughout the series. It does so again in season 3. It's not the show's strongest season because, again, the first season is unbeatable, but it's better than season 2, and you have to admire a show that has a concise beginning, middle, and end. No offense to The Walking Dead, for instance, which doesn't have that, but obviously very different beast. But I do pick on The Walking Dead for its kind of longevity, its undead nature. It's just seeming like a rambling corpse at this point. But you have to give a show credit when it has a vision. It's willing to stick to its guns in terms of we're only going to do 3 seasons. That's the show, and then we're going to move on. And ultimately, by the way, the show that the creator of the show moved on to create another Apple TV Plus show called Shrinking, and that show's great also, and it's on my honorable mentions. So, that Ted Lasso season 3, it's kind of like you're sad it's over, but you're glad that it happened. Kind of, that's a little cliche, but it's the end of an era for me. I will still always watch the Christmas special every Christmas. I did so again this year. I will likely probably more so than any series I've ever seen. Probably go back and rewatch the whole series. Pretty regularly. I know I've already watched this first season at least 3 or 4 times, so I suspect that'll continue to be the case. And season 3, I think, again, helps tie a bow on what was a really truly great series. Have either of you guys watched or finished Ted Lasso, or am I the only one who's on that Ted Lasso train?
Yeah. I watched all 3 seasons, and I feel like when a show like this ends, and I have a lot of the same feelings you do with like just having a show that's just about like unapologetic optimism, and
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it's really nice to have to just watch a show like that. And when a show like that ends, then I think, yeah, it's a little bit sad, but I can also be like, okay, well, what's going to happen next with these creators, and what are they going to go on to make next? So you can kind of be, okay, well, this was great, but as you said, season 1 was the best, and then it starts to petter off just a little bit. But you're like, okay, well, what will these guys do next? And maybe we get a new kind of Ted Lasso-esque show, or
Yeah, and that's what Shrinking is for me, by the way.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've seen. Have you seen Shrinking?
I have, actually. Yeah, I watched the first. I can't remember if I watched the whole first season, but I definitely watched a lot of it. Yeah, really good stuff.
That's Jason Segel,
Mhm.
starring alongside
Harrison
someone you might have
Ford.
seen, Harrison Ford, as well as Jessica Williams, who is really, really funny. But it's like the whole cast in that show, in Shrinking, again, similar kind of. It does feel almost like they just took the vibes from Ted Lasso and then moved it over to Shrinking. It really
Yeah.
feels that way. And
Yeah, I guess I can see
it's
that.
a kind of a spiritual successor in a lot of ways to Ted Lasso. So if you did enjoy it, it took me a little bit because it felt like a little on the nose to be like, hey, it's a show about a psychologist, therapist who is depressed, and it just feels like a little like it's like I feel like I've heard that story before, I've seen it before. I can't put my finger on when or where I would have seen it, but it feels like I've seen it before. But the approach that it takes, and this is maybe not fair, but I've never really liked Jason Segel very much.
What?
I don't know. If I look at his filmography, he,
How I Met Your Mother, you just didn't enjoy any episode.
No, I don't like that show.
Oh,
no.
We have a
But
problem.
well, there's your problem, right? I mean, I don't know. Like, it just he's never really vibed with me on I guess a couple different levels, but he really works for me here. And maybe he's doing the same thing he did in How I Met Your Mother or whatever, but and I'm just not, I didn't pick up on that, or I'm in a different space. But for me, it's just a different beast. It was kind of the same thing with Jason Sudeikis, by the way, who I also didn't really care for, generally speaking, in most things. But then in Ted Lasso, he just comes across as the most endearing person, and I have to say the same thing about Jason Segel. So maybe it's the writing. I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay, Jeremy, your number 3, or your vague for the audience. We should fill the audience in here. Jeremy doesn't like to prepare a list, quote unquote. He doesn't like to be boxed into formats, quote unquote, or structure. He likes to be a little bit more freewheeling. He's a free spirit, as it were. So he is deciding in real time what his favorite, and I'm ripping here to give him a little bit extra time, to give him a little longer to decide what his number 3 movie is, or television show is. But Jeremy, have you decided? Did you know what your number 3 is, or do we need to come back to you?
Yeah, I don't really watch TV.
Is that because you have a kid, or you just don't, or just TV just doesn't fit your lifestyle?
I guess it's all the same. I guess I don't know. I mean, yeah, there's only The Last of Us obviously is the only one I can kind of
sure,
kind of comes to me, because that's the only time I remember actively settling in or making it the plan.
Right, Sunday nights.
You know what I mean?
HBO.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then so that's probably my number 1.
Spoilers.
But I don't know if I have 3. But I do know Beef. I did watch many episodes of that. I don't know if I finished it, but
Beef is great. Beef is
yeah,
it won a bunch of Emmys, and
yeah, it did for
it's on
acting.
my honorable mentions. It didn't make my top
Hmm.
my top 3, but it was close, I would say, for making it. I really liked Beef. I just think it's like such a good like glimpse into the short. How do I phrase this? We all have a short fuse at the right moment, right? We all have
Mhm.
patience given in the right moments. But if you catch someone at the right exact moment when they are at their lowest or in the shit, you can kind of like explode them, right? This is an example of that happening to two people at the exact same time, and it's like it creates such a endlessly entertaining
Hmm.
back and forth dynamic and a glimpse into how regardless of where you come from in life, we're all just people, right? Like we're all just human beings with flaws and problems. And so you have the titular character, well, not titular because no one's called Beef, but they have a beef. The two characters who have the beef come from these completely different style of life, right? But this one moment joins them together, and then they can't separate because their emotions are too raw and they're too, I don't know, weak to those emotions. They're too willing to give in to those like
Mhm.
baser instincts. I don't know.
Mhm.
Jeremy, how would you describe it? The beef or beef? Sorry, not the beef is a different show.
Yeah, I think you pretty much you summed it up pretty well there. I just found it super entertaining and refreshing, like just seeing these two super normal people unhinged, and then, like you said, like that one bad thing kind of triggering it, and then we just get this prolonged like rivalry or whatever, and it's just so like fascinating to see that play out, and just so funny and like oh my goodness moments.
Right.
Um, so yeah, that's basically why I kind of like stuck with me.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. Stephen Yun and Ali Wong both won an Emmy. I'm pretty sure for their role in this. But like, I genuinely believe that every single actor that's on the show is doing some like of their best work. Like
Yeah, so
every
funny.
even side character is effortlessly hilarious. But the thing that makes it so funny to me, anyway, is that they all feel like true to life humans, and
Hmm.
they're just
Mhm.
dealing with. It's like they can't really understand why someone would do the things that the characters in the show are doing. It's like it doesn't make sense to them, and it doesn't even make sense to us as viewers because it's so ridiculous,
But it's
but
like
you
a
buy
it's like
it.
a fantasy though, because you could keep doing these things, but
Right.
no one would ever do that.
Right. Like when they look up like, oh my god, like how they figure out who's who and like how to find each other and stuff based on
Yeah,
like the like this like detective work that they're doing.
yeah,
Again,
it would
no
never
one would
last
ever do
this
that.
long.
Yeah, or
There would never be
exactly.
this many interactions and last this long, and like they're basically playing a game, like at a certain point.
But for both of them it's an escape from their monotonous
Yeah,
life.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Neither of them
It's more
like the life
exciting.
they're living. Yeah. It's a great show. It's deserving of the Emmys. Vince, do you have a
Yeah,
chance to watch Beef?
I did,
What do you
and
think?
your description of like how it wouldn't go on as far as it was, like totally right. Because like
yeah.
when he goes to Ali Wong's house, Amy's house, and as like the like construction guy, like that's way too sketchy. She would like no one would ever let him in. And the way it ends, where he pees in their bathroom and then runs away,
No,
the
man, that's
husband was
so
way too calm.
hilarious.
No one
No,
would ever
man,
be that.
that is so funny though. It works because Ali Wong's husband, um, played by Joseph Lee, I think.
Mhm.
No,
Yeah, you got it.
yeah, is he comes off as just such a himbo, right? But then he
Mhm.
has this like whole deep, like, his own like maturity and emotional maturity that you just don't see because we only see him through Ali Wong's perspective.
Mm.
I don't know. I just think it makes sense because he's a little naive that he would let that happen, right? That he would let these guys in. Um, and so I don't know. For me, it works. It is ridiculous. You guys are right. Like it's not like a great example of what would actually happen in real life. But you're right, Jeremy. You're totally hit the nail on the head. It's like a fantasy come true, essentially. All right, so Jeremy, you have to come up with at least one more because you have mentioned already The Last of Us. We'll get to that. And now Beef, which is on neither mine or Vince's list. So you have to come up with at least one more. How about this? We'll take a quick break to do some honorable mention, just riffing. That'll maybe spur some memory. So, Vince, do you want to list a couple of your honorable mentions that didn't make your top three? Here's how I like to do it. You can do it however you like, but I'll give you some kind of examples. I know you haven't been on the show for a while, but I like to talk about sometimes why it didn't make the list, right? But you can feel free to get into like the show itself, why it's great, all that stuff. Feel free to riff as much as you like on that stuff. But yeah, take it away.
Yeah, I think I'll start with my. I have three.
You want to
and I'll start with my least controversial one.
Yeah. Okay. Go ahead.
Which is Gen V, the boys spin-off, which I thoroughly enjoyed all the way through, and it honestly didn't feel like a spin-off of a show. It just felt like the next season of the boys, just without all the characters, except for one.
But here's the thing. I mean, the boys works because I love the characters on that show, and not because I love the gore and the excessive. Gore isn't even the right word because it's not really gory. It's just bloody. It's just lots of blood. So it's like, I don't really love the gross out stuff that the boys likes to do. That's not my like cup of tea necessarily. So I tried getting into the. I actually watched probably 4 episodes. I do want to finish it because I understand that this show blends seamlessly into the upcoming season of The Boys.
Yes.
But again, don't spoil no spoilers. But I do love The Boys, and I can you articulate what it is like, where those connections to the boy, what works for the boys and what works for Gen V that could convince me to come back into the show, because again, the lack of those characters that have that charisma that the boys has, like that is a truly stellar cast. I don't feel that that's what you have in Gen V, but I don't, where do you come down on that?
Yeah, I think the characters in Gen V are actually quite relatable, I find, and in some of their struggles that they have, but the overall arching story that's going through this, it still builds up that same kind of dread. Like you're feeling like, okay, something bad's going to happen. You can kind of see the pieces lining up, and you just have this undertone of dread that just keeps building up and building up. And then as it gets to the end, as things start to fall and you get that payoff, and it to me, that's like the same feeling as one of the seasons of The Boys, where you get that feeling of dread and it keeps building and building. And so it felt the same way as a season of The Boys would in Gen V. And I also personally connected with some of the struggles that some of the characters were going through, and that kind of hit me on a personal level. And
that'll help a lot. Yeah, it's set in a college setting, and I haven't been in college for a long time, so I guess, and I've never been in an American college, which is a very different experience from what we have here in Canada, where there isn't really like that same fraternity kind of vibe. You don't go live on campus really unless you travel for school, and even then, I have to imagine. I don't know, Vince. Yeah, did you travel for school?
No, not for school.
Right. So even for those who did, what I've heard is that it's quite a different experience. It's still very, very much not like what the U.S. college experience is like, which I assume why people pay so much money so they can have that experience. I don't know. But yeah, so I guess that makes sense. I need to go back and probably give that another shot. There are certain things that did grab me, but it was one of those things where I'd watch an episode and be like, okay, that's good, but I didn't want to immediately go watch the next episode, which that is a different feeling than The Boys did give me a different experience where I did want to do that. Okay, so let me name one of my honorable mentions.
Yes.
And then we'll go back. I want to talk about The Bad Batch season 2. This is a very early. This is a very early show from 2023. It premiered on like January 3rd or something like that. Of 2023. This is the sequel to The Bad Batch season 1, which was a 2022 show. And this is an animated, essentially the animated sequel to the Clone Wars, right? The Clone Wars ended with season 7, and they immediately transitioned over to the Bad Batch, which follows a group of clone commandos, clone special forces, I guess, because the clone commandos are different, who are mutated clones who are unique from the traditional clone in the Clone Wars, in the Star Wars world. And the animation is still as top-notch as Lucasfilm Animation has kind of really taken a major leap when they kind of did season 6 and 7. It just really is unbelievable how good it looks. Some of the, especially the environments and ship designs, can look, given the right setting, almost as good as live action stuff, in my opinion. A little bit more stylized, obviously. But what the Bad Batch is doing so great, and season 3 is just around the corner, is that it's a really great pairing with Andor, because it gives you the perspective of how the Empire established itself, right? We saw when Palpatine in the Senate announced that they were going to reorganize the Galactic Republic into the First Galactic Empire, and everyone cheered, and Padme said that cringy line. But it's funny, James Cameron loves that line. There's an interview where he's talking with James Cameron and George Lucas are having a chat. It's like in one of those, I don't know what it was for, but they were like interviewing each other, essentially. James Cameron thought, he's like, you had this brilliant line in the prequels about how, I think, what did she say? Padme says,
that's the way democracy dies, with thunderous applause.
Yes. And they're making analogies to like the Vietnam War and all these other things. It's a great, actually, if you can find that piece, it's really fun to watch George Lucas and James Cameron riff off each other. It's really James Cameron leading the conversation, because he's just that much more kind of like compelling person than George Lucas, who's like a really chill dude. But The Bad Batch establishes this baseline of how does the Empire get started. It gives it to you through the lens of these characters. Actually, hold on, I'll pull it up here so I have the screen share going. So season 2 ends. I'll just kind of skip through because I don't want to spend too much time here. But the season 2 ends on a kind of 2-part finale that, personally, I thought was not only shocking, given what we've seen from Star Wars as of late, which is, I think, played it very safe, including The Mandalorian. We still haven't had any movies, and even Ahsoka has played it, I think, extremely safe. And The Bad Batch season 2 takes that. Again, Andor is an exception to that as well, but they take that formula and they throw it out the window, and they do some extremely compelling character studies under the shadow of Imperial, the Imperial boot. And there's a compelling mystery about how the clones still fit into, the return of Palpatine in the sequels and all that stuff. It is some of the best Star Wars storytelling going on right now. I understand that it's animated, and that can sometimes be a barrier of entry for some people, but I think the storytelling here is relatively mature, especially for an animated series, especially for Star Wars. And they are not shy from, I think, doing some pretty compelling and interesting things. There's even there's an Alien reference. There's an episode that heavily references Alien. They do some really cool stuff with mood, and I just the stakes are real. There are, which I think has been a major problem with Star Wars as of late, and I'll talk about that more later. But it is 100% one of the best Star Wars shows out there right now. I can't wait for the final season. That's season 3. It's coming out very soon. So get on board. Go back, watch the first episode. It's a 90-minute pilot, essentially, that picks up right at Order 66. It is essentially a animated movie that's much better than the Clone Wars animated movie was from whenever hell that came out. So I highly recommend going to watch that. If you don't like that, then you're probably fine. But I can't imagine you watching that and saying, no, this sucks, not wanting to watch more, especially if you're into the Star Wars animation at all. So that's Bad Batch Season 2. Vince, have you seen Bad Batch?
Oh, I'm on board. I'm right on board.
Okay,
Watched all the way to the end of season
perfect.
2, and I had my own on like gripes with little parts of season 2 where they
It's
like
not
take
perfect.
breaks
Yeah.
with the storyline, and but overall, I agree 100%. It's a great show.
Great. I'm glad you agree. Jeremy, I know I can't convince you to watch Star Wars on television for some reason, but I'm telling you, man, this is some cool shit. Okay?
Well, I like how every time you ask Vince if he's seen something, he's like he's 100% so far.
Yeah.
So he's shooting. I'm batting 1,000 here. This is great.
Great.
This is great because normally when I ask Jeremy if he's seen something, it's all like, yeah, it's gonna be a no from me, dog. A lot of that. So, Jeremy, I already know you haven't seen it because I've tried to convince you to watch The Bad Batch before, and nothing I'm saying now is going to convince you. So, on that note, let's go back to Jeremy. Do you have a number 2 pick?
I don't. But do you guys not have like Succession on your list at all? Like, I
That's a
thought that
great
was, like,
question,
the
Jeremy.
biggest
And
show
the answer is
of
no.
the year.
Yeah, I know.
So I don't know what's going on with you guys who watch everything. But
Did you watch Succession?
no, but like I'm
Okay.
aware of its
cultural
popularity
relevance.
and,
Yeah. So, okay. So I know why I haven't watched it, but Jeremy, is there a reason that you, knowing about it, having heard obviously HBO, I know you're particularly willing to give HBO stuff a shot. What held you back from it? Is it the fact that it's already 3 seasons or 4 seasons or whatever, and that's like too much?
Well, I like now knowing that it's over and it is only 4 seasons. So, I mean, I'm not ruling it out entirely. I'm definitely leaning towards watching it now. It's based off of what I've heard.
Mm-hmm. But was it just because it was ongoing? That I feel like that can be a challenge. If there's an ongoing series, it's hard to like convince yourself to jump in, especially if it's ongoing for a long time. Fortunately, we're talking about not that many seasons. This is my challenge with Sopranos. I really want to go back and watch Sopranos, but how many seasons of Sopranos are we talking about? Like, how many are we talking?
What do you mean? How many do you think there are?
How many seasons I assume there's at least
probably like 7 or
6,
something.
7 seasons. Yeah, it's a lot. Like, and this is like old school TV, so like probably 12 episodes, 24 episodes a season. Like, yikes. I don't know. You're right. Succession is probably a blind spot for me.
Barry.
I love Barry.
Everyone talks about Barry a lot.
I love Barry. I do love Barry, but I'm only partway through season 2. You can't convince me to watch Silo. I won't do it. I'm sorry. I can't. Vince, are you aware of the Succession phenomena? Is there any reason that you didn't watch it?
Only that I know it exists. It's on. I just looked up really quickly here. It's on Crave, and I'm kind of in like the cycle of subscribe to Disney Plus for a month, and then Crave for a month, and then Netflix for a month, and kind of make my way through the cycles and let things build up over time. And Succession just never hit my list of like, Kate, when I get Crave, I'll give it a watch. But I hear it's really good, so I think when my Crave cycle comes around again, it's on my list.
Yeah, I think you're right to, by the way, cycle through Crave because it's $20 a month.
Oh yeah,
with HBO, and it's like that's crazy. Like $20. It's more than that actually. But even just saying 20 drives me up the wall. But anyway, you're right. I think it's probably going to be something similar for me where I'll probably get to it. But here's the thing: Succession is about rich people problems and business acumen, and I could be misinterpreting it because I've never seen it, but this is the impression I get of it, and I deal with a lot of that stuff at work, and I have a hard time caring about rich people problems. It actually really irks me. So that's a challenge for me. Okay, Vince, you're number 2.
My number two My number two put a little pep in my step when I started watching this show, and that is Loki season two.
Great show.
And, oh yeah, it just made me so happy to see the Marvel TV kind of come back to the quality, I guess, that I was expecting out of Marvel. You know, indie company Marvel can make great stuff, but like when they have a show like Loki and a story that they tell too, with time jumping back and forth, time jumping stories just get me. It's one of my favorite forms of storytelling where it just really does it for me. And I think it kind of stems back from like when I was a kid playing Chrono Trigger. If anybody remembers that from the Super Nintendo, that being a
Yes, I
time
do.
travel.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
You do?
Yep.
Oh,
Yes, I do
fantastic.
remember. It's been a long time to be honest. But yes, I do know it was a time travel story.
Yeah.
This is different because there's a whole like realm outside of time in the in that show, the TVA. That the TVA has such a cool vibe about it that it really helps carry the show in my opinion. Tom Hiddleston. Turns out he's a pretty good actor. Turns out
he's putting in the work.
Yeah, I love Owen Wilson here though. I think he really steals the show for me. He has such. Here's the thing. He's kind of just playing Owen Wilson, but he's been playing Owen Wilson for his entire career, and ain't broke, don't fix it. And so his whole thing about the Sea-Doos, jet skis, is endearing. I think it's fun. The way that the series wraps up, because it's only it's a 2-season series. It's a mini series, and I think it ends in such an interesting place that leaves you questioning things in a way that, I'll be honest, no Marvel thing has left me feeling that way in a very long time. And so one of the things I want to talk about today was the fact that from trends and topics of the year, is that Marvel, you could even argue maybe Star Wars to some degree, but Marvel for sure on the decline. We've talked about this on the Rain Show for a while. Certainly hitting a slump. Decline is a tough word, but three data points I think equate to a trend. I think you can do no fewer than 3, right? 2 is not a trend. 3 is a trend, and there are at least 3 data points from this year alone that constitute a trend. Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania, Secret Invasion, which might be the worst thing that Marvel's ever made, and what's the other? Oh, and the Marvels. So there is an exception to that, I guess, in there, which is Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, which I think is quite good. I had it at one point in my top 3. It did get bumped out of my top 3 movies, so spoilers for that for later. But I don't know, guys. Are we worried about the state of Marvel? Loki does give me some hope, to be honest, because I think it does something that it uses the medium of television in a way that makes sense for the storytelling it's trying to tell. It has interesting stories, interesting mysteries. It has fun characters, and leaves us in a place of wonder, which I think is what Marvel can do when it's doing its job well. But are we concerned, Jeremy? I'll go to you first. Jeremy, are you concerned about what's happening over at Marvel and Disney?
Concerned is just not the word I would personally use.
Too soon.
I guess. I guess Feige could use that. I mean, I don't really care either way. I mean, it can't last forever, I guess. But I don't know. I haven't watched any of these shows. I just don't care to. I just don't know why I would. But Deadpool 3 is the only thing I'm thinking of, basically.
Did you hear I think I saw there was a headline from like today or yesterday or sometime earlier this week.
Yeah.
That was like, Deadpool 3 is set to save the MCU. I feel like that's a little bit of PR stuff going on there. Do you?
Yeah, but I don't know. If you remember our conversations, I've been kind of hyping this one up pretty high, and when I saw that was just kind of confirming my whole kind of hope for it. And just with Hugh Jackman alone, like that star power, that Marvel legacy, which is kind of the last big Marvel stuff has been based off of legacy, essentially, with the multiverse, that's like the new era we're in with superheroes and comics, is like
right.
like it's like this weird modern multiverse is like all we care about.
I think it's all they care about. I'm telling you right now that the multiverse is probably the MCU's single biggest problem and probably the reason that it's stumbling, to be honest. And I think the hope, what Marvel needs, from my opinion, and I don't know if Deadpool 3 is this, but maybe it is essentially their version of a Crisis on Infinite Earths, which collapses the multiverse back into a single universe. There's obviously a DC Marvel correlation there, but multiverse means no stakes. And no stakes means boring storytelling. So until they can solve that problem, and I think there's no way to solve that problem without making multiversal travel extremely difficult or impossible or erasing the multiverse altogether, I think you're in for a real problem.
Yeah, but with Deadpool, it's just not going to be taken so seriously.
Yeah, I think that helps.
You know what I mean? It's going to be really poking fun at it. And then because it's peaked already, like you know what I mean? Like it's can't keep doing it, but it's also like the genie out of the bottle. It's like how do you like gracefully go back? And it just comes down to storytelling and risks, I guess. But when it comes to the superhero, tentpole movie, it's go big or go home type thing.
Is that why you think TV doesn't work for you? Because by its nature, it can't really be that big.
Yeah, it's not really about the scale though. Like it's just about character development and like what they go through. Like
yeah, but TV allows for you to spend more time with a character in theory, and that's what you get with Loki,
other characters. Like who'd you say was in Loki? Luke Wilson or whatever.
No,
it's like okay, like why?
It's not Luke Wilson. It's Owen Wilson. To be fair, he's the better Wilson brother. To be fair,
it's just like why is he just thrown into? I don't know. It's just not for me, I guess.
It's interesting you say that because you're not the first, and I kind of want to understand it a bit better, and maybe you don't know the answer to this, but there's podcasts I listen to, people who are the biggest Marvel fans in the entire world, who are just like, I don't know, the TV stuff doesn't excite me, and I don't get it technically because it's like, it seems like it should excite you as a fan of that stuff. It's like more of it. And you get
when you talk about Secret Invasion though, it's just like it doesn't do anything. There's no excitement, there's no building towards something. It just all these projects just seem like they're a little haphazard in terms of how they connect or like their hopes in terms of them connecting because like I don't know, like contracts aren't like aligning up or like people have just disagreements on what
the business side of things. I think the challenge is if you go into a world where you assume that most people aren't going to watch the shows but only the movies, you're limited by what you can tell, what stories you can tell in the TV shows. And I think the challenge, and maybe they're waking up to this, and I think there's some positive signs out of like Daredevil, Born Again, having gone through this kind of complete shakeup, and really adopting this Netflix canon as a concept, to say that what television can do, and I think Jeremy hit on this really well, which is that it can allow you to explore character in a much more interesting way without having to be world-ending stakes and having to do all that bit larger than life movie stuff. You have more time. But what the Marvel shows have tried to do is try to bring those big stakes, and because they have smaller budgets, it feels chintzy and it feels cheap. So I don't know. I think that's a problem. To be honest, I don't think Loki suffered that problem. It maintained a relatively small scope, which I think is important, and then established a concept, a really interesting concept about where it ends the series. I'm not gonna spoil it. That has the potential to lay interesting groundwork for the future of the MCU. This is the challenge that I think they've been having, which is that they want to have their cake and eat it too. They want the shows to be as big as the movies, but they don't want to spend the money, and they don't have the cast. They don't have all the actors that they need to do that, and they can't do the crossover stuff as much. So it ends up feeling less important. And then when you get to the movies, they feel like they don't matter at all. I mean, if you watched Secret Invasion and then went to see the Marvels, it's like that show didn't exist. And maybe they chose to edit that way because that show sucks, and it truly sucks. But it's you feel like you'd want to reward the people who are watching those things, and maybe it's the other way around. Maybe you need to reward the movie viewers with saying, hey, here's stuff that you're never going to see on the big screen. And it's an opportunity to explore a character's emotional core depth. Like imagine, if we had introduced the Punisher in the movies first, and then you got the Punisher stuff from like season 2 Daredevil and the Punisher series. That's a really compelling story to tell. Once you've established a character, and then you have the opportunity to tell these really kind of flesh out their backstory, and then have them appear maybe as a side character or something again later in a movie, right? And I personally, with the kind of new canonization of Netflix stuff, can't wait for Jon Bernthal to come back as Punisher. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. Any final thoughts on Loki season 2?
Yeah. The way they did the end of episode 4, which again I won't go into spoilers, but Julian, do you remember how they finished off that episode?
Episode 4?
It's the one where they cut to white at the end.
Oh yeah, it's an interesting. I mean, I like the whole series. I think what stands out to me is the and by the way, you're right that final moment in that episode 4 is really cool because you don't know where it's going to go next.
Exactly, and you have a whole week. Yeah. You have a whole week to think, and everybody's just freaking out, and we don't know what does this mean.
I do love, by the way, the weekly release model. We've been talking about this for a while. It has to be. It's the only way this works. I think that streamers are understanding this, and this is another trend that I think we'll see continue in 2024. Okay, my number 2 is The Last of Us. I know, Vince, this is your number 1. I know, Jeremy, This is your number 1, so let's dive into The Last of Us. The Last of Us, obviously, an adaptation of the Naughty Dog video game, massively one of the biggest video games of all time, right? There's actually 2. They're basing this Last of Us Season 2 on The Last of Us Part 2, the video game. And that's in development now. It's shooting now. There's likely Part 2 will be adapted into 2 seasons of television. But we're talking about Season 1. Season 1 adapts the first game almost 1-to-1, with the exception of Episode 3, which gives us probably the best episode of the series, which gives us the backstory of Bill. And I think that this show works for 2 reasons. A, it treats the source material with a lot of respect. It doesn't try to say, well, are people going to understand clickers and all these other concepts? Is that going to work for TV? And this happens all the time. For whatever reason, people feel like they know better than the source material, and they want to make changes. They don't really do that. They tell a very 1-to-1 story. In fact, to the point where if you played the game, the show itself can feel almost a little redundant. I think this is part of the reason that I put it at number 2 and not number 1, is because this is really the second time I've experienced this story after playing the game. It's nice to get a little bit of additional things, like, again, that episode 3 where they flesh out Bill's story, and also that episode where they do there's technically a prequel game, the add-on DLC that I never played, that gives more of Ellie's backstory that they give us in this show, and I really appreciated that because, again, I had never done that. But it treats the source material with respect, but also really makes it feel grounded in a real world, in our real world. And of course, there's some things like why there's so much forest outside of Boston and stuff that it doesn't make really any sense and all that stuff. But ultimately, that's doesn't really matter. It understands the characters. It understands why they're important. It understands their dynamics and why they're important. I do think they dropped the ball with the Joel killing spree. Spoilers, I guess. The Joel killing spree at the end of the series. I think the game handles it much better. The show rushes through that sequence, and I think that's a mistake. I ultimately think I like the game more than the show. I think that's where I've kind of landed on this, because I think the game understands what it's trying to accomplish and uses the gameplay to get there on top of the cutscenes. whereas you have to really changing the venue or the medium to television requires a different perspective. And I just think that, and this could be that I played the game first. I just think that the show loses something in that translation. I think for people who'd never played the game, this is one of the best shows ever, and I understand that. But for me, who has, it's missing something. I don't know. I don't know who wants to go next, but what do you guys think about the show, especially compared to the game? How does this land for you? I don't know, Jeremy. Do you want to go first?
Yeah, I mean, we were just so tapped into the game because we were just that perfect age, owning the PS3.
Naughty Dog was the best studio in the world. Yeah,
we were just so zoned into that like reality of like this is like the next big thing. You know what I mean? Like, you can go watch your movies or whatever, but we'll be over here playing this masterpiece that does so many wonderful things and is dark and is just uh it blended like the experience of a movie and game like pretty seamlessly. So obviously a tall task for the show, but we've talked about it a lot. It's like just having Neil Druckmann, the creator,
yeah,
involved in the show is just such a blessing, really.
it's so important.
There's like how much better could the show really be? You know what I mean?
I think if you didn't have Neil Druckmann involved, I think the show would be, I don't know how to quantify it, but like significantly worse as a show, because I think it doesn't take much to disconnect you from what made the game successful. That I think someone who maybe doesn't come from that world, it doesn't truly get it, could easily start misinterpreting things and start applying like, oh, this is where it's important, and it's not that thing. And Neil Druckmann really helped, I think, maintain, like, keep the train on the tracks, right? Like, no. Episode 1 needs to be a recreation of the first, or the prequel, of the first act, essentially, of the game. It has to be that, and it has to be that by in this specific way. And again, I'm speculating because we don't know exactly of how what his influence is, but again, you can imagine a scenario where it could easily get off track if you didn't have someone advocating for the original vision. And I think that's a great point, Jeremy. Vince, where do you land on this show? Again, this is obviously your number one.
Yeah, number one. Again, yeah, like you guys, I played The Last of Us when it came out and absolutely loved it. I think one of the big things when it comes to adaptations from a game to a movie, I don't know what it is, but it's the music. If they can,
well, yeah. Santiago, what's his name? Man, what is his name? I'll find it. But
yeah,
continue.
But like if you can bring in some of the music, just like hitting some of those notes, or even like using whole tracks, just rearrange for sure for TV, but like using the same music. And I'll get into this with some of my movie choices later, but I think that does a lot for tying in the feelings that you had when you were playing the game, and when it's the same music, you're pulling back into those feelings, and it's really bringing you into that. And then that, coupled with how great the acting was from everybody in the show.
Oh yeah, you can't really beat having cast like maybe the best casting choice of all time is having Pedro Pascal play Joel Miller. It's like, what a great cast. I think people were concerned about Bella Ramsey as Ellie, but I think she does a great job.
She was so good.
Yeah, and by the way, the music from Gustavo Santaolalla.
Thank you.
Maybe one of the hardest names to pronounce of all time. I'm a sucker for Spanish guitar, classical guitar, and this whole show is built around, or the whole score, essentially, from his creation is built around Spanish guitar, and it's great. It's all-time great score, hands down, just from the game alone.
Oh yeah, I've got that on repeat sometimes when I'm at work, just listening to the soundtrack.
Also, I don't think we have to give Craig Mazin a lot of credit here, as the showrunner and the director of 2 episodes. He did Chernobyl, another HBO miniseries, a truly heartbreaking, heart-wrenching, can't look away from car crash series of, and I say that in like the events of the series are kind of this like non-stop train that you can't look away from. Not that it's like a car crash that's a bad thing. That sometimes is a misunderstanding. But he took that show and those sensibilities, and by the way, coming from a comedy background, crushed that show, and then brought those learnings to The Last of Us. And I think it's hard to there's not that many successful video game adaptations. This is by far the most successful. It's not even close, probably.
Yeah.
And it's made the game, which was already a phenomenon among video game players, into a worldwide phenomenon for almost everybody. That is a home run to win the World Series type of execution, right? And
hell yeah.
I just don't think that can be understated. Jeremy, anything else you want to add about The Last of Us?
No, I'm just excited to see like where they take season 2, because obviously that game is so polarizing and still, I think, being digested to this day. And you're gonna need more than one season, I think, to pull off game number 2.
Yeah. Oh, so two is gonna be tough, man. I think it's gonna test people's allegiance to this. They're like, oh man, Last of Us, such a great series. Can't wait to see what happens with Joel and Ellie next. Well, the thing is, I feel like they could have done a second season that was in between the games and totally bought themselves some time, because the rumor is that The Last of Us Part 3 is in development. And that likely that they're going to want to try to avoid a Game of Thrones scenario where you outpace the production of the source material. But I also know that it's going to take at least 2 seasons to tell The Last of Us Part 2 properly, so there's time. We'll just put it that way. But it is going to be a true test. I'm actually not really excited about having to listen to the what will probably be a not a great reaction to the beginning of that series. I'm worried about it. I think if those who know, and those who don't look it up. You're better to just wait and have it experience for yourself. Okay, so that brings me to my number one. My number one is The Bear season 2. The Bear also took home a bunch of Emmys. That's not the reason I put it at number one. The reason I put it at number one is because this is a truly nearly perfect show. It understands its characters. It understands what keeps the audience motivated. It has a satisfying. I really feel like they have this brilliant like methodology here where yes, the characters are great and getting to experience their individual character arcs and progressions is satisfying, no doubt. But having the Bear centered around opening, especially season 2, opening a new restaurant, I think creates this really interesting. It's like having this little home base that you're excited to, like, oh, look at the progress they're making. You get so invested in the restaurant being a success, and I think that is such like an underlying thread for how the show works. Because again, the characters are the bread and butter of the show, no doubt. Ayo Edebiri, specifically, who plays Sydney, she's going to be directing some episodes next season. If she has, I think she already directed a few. Breakout star, easily. Like Jeremy Allen White is great, no, for sure, but I think Ayo Edebiri is like on a whole other level. There's they do a oneer. The first season has a oneer where they like this. Everything's blowing up in the kitchen of the old restaurant, and this one it's a oneer, but it's a extended sequence of Sydney and Carmen, Jeremy Allen White, and Ayo Edebiri, sitting under a table, putting together furniture, and talking about their lives. And it's so long and it's so perfectly executed that you just can't. It's gripping. And again, you have this underlying motivation of wanting to see them succeed. You really care. But and I feel like it's almost cheating because they're using some of these like storytelling shorthands that I think are obvious, to us as viewers after the fact, but maybe are lost in the shuffle when you're writing a series, or because these should be leveraged more often, or maybe it's too simple. I don't know, but they set up these characters like Jeremy Allen White's character Carmen, like Lionel Boyce's character Marcus, like Lisa Colon Zoya's character Tina, who and that's without, and there's others also, of course, but they start in this very stubborn, very set in their ways type of attitude, and then Richie obviously is a great example. This is probably Evan Moss Bashard, who won also an Emmy for his role, as far as I remember. They start in these very stuck in their ways kind of places, and then by the end of the series, they've evolved. They've gone through a whole arc individually, but in relation to and in correlation with the restaurant, which again helps keep you motivated, to this place where they understand not only themselves better but also each other better. And I really truly can't overemphasize how satisfying it is to watch these individuals come together to create something beautiful, right? In this case, it's a restaurant experience, but it could be anything. And the interpersonal dynamics are not necessarily the driver, because I think there's a lot of things that keep momentum in this series, as I mentioned, but they add so much flavor, if I can use a cooking analogy, to everything that's going on, right? Because they're their own individual humans. They're their own people. They're not just they're not just what they are at the restaurant. They have their own motivations and backstories and things that I think help make them extremely relatable. You'll get these amazing this flashback sequence that I think is, I don't know, a little hard to watch because it's a little true to life, maybe too true to life, about a family Christmas dinner. And people say it's full of a bunch of like cameos of big actors and stuff. But I think for me, that's not even my favorite episode. I think the Carmen episode of season 2 is my favorite episode. Sorry, my Richie episode, the Richie episode, not Carmen episode. But I think it does a great job of illustrating how it can take these kind of simple concepts of just like, hey, a family dinner, and weave these interpersonal relationships into it to make it maybe the most gripping thing you've ever seen. And so for me, the first season of this show was a revelation. Season 2, I was ready to be a little disappointed because it's hard to top such a great first season. But this is a rare example where this isn't just better than season 1. It is like miles better than season 1. And it needs the foundation of season 1 for sure. But season 2 is like a true masterpiece, I think, in storytelling and acting and and writing ultimately, because it revolves. These characters are their writer, who wrote them, and how they come to life, and that part of that is the acting, also, of course. It all comes together. But yeah, I can't say enough about the show. Vince, help me keep continuing batting 1,000. Have you seen The Bear?
You know it. I got
great.
you. I got you, man. Yeah. I watched season 1 and 2. I ended up watching season 1 and 2 back to back because I didn't get onto the Bear train until a little bit later when season 2 was coming out. Mm-hmm. And it hooked me. As you were put on your list, it's like, did I even see season 2? And like, of course I did. I just watched it all in one huge chunk, and the
seasons are pretty slow. I mean, I'm sorry, it's pretty short, I think.
Yeah.
And so and you can kind of blow through it pretty quick.
Oh yeah.
But I think you're totally right. So sorry, I did cut you off. Continue.
Yeah, and you're totally right. It's like this idea of like base building, like building like a home base, and like seeing this progression, and every episode something new's being added, and not just with the base, but with the characters as well. As like you say, that everybody's growing, And like you see even the main character, he falls down and he has to pick himself back up, and the growth that he has to go through and struggle with his own, sometimes anger and frustrations, and having to work through that and still make everybody, work with everybody. I thought was it's all just really like it's an inspiring show.
Jeremy, I know you've seen some of it. Have you been able to keep up? Have you seen all of season 2?
No, I saw one episode of season 2, I think.
Okay.
Which is pretty cool. It was like some sort of like house party was happening.
Yeah, that's what the flashback episode I was talking about.
And it was like just pretty sweet because it was showcasing like the anxieties and stresses of the kitchen, but it was translated within this like family affair environment, and I thought that was pretty sweet.
And some huge actors just kind of just keep walking into that like some truly great talent. I don't know how they do it. Like I don't know how they get these actors to kind of just to walk in for a single scene, but or like even one episode. But yeah, I can't express enough. Jeremy, do yourself a favor, watch all of season 2 of The Bear. I think particularly for me, it's the fact that it is a show about a kitchen. I worked in a kitchen. I mean, I was always front of house, and they do have front of house here, which is why the Richie thing probably works for me too, because he kind of starts to understand the whole front of house concept. But I think if you've ever worked in any restaurant, this will have additional kind of value for you. All right, so that's television. I'm going to just list out some of my additional honorable mentions. I'll try to make this very quick. So, Poker Face, really fun detective series. Very much enjoyed that. There's a lot of great Star Trek this last year. Star Trek Strange New World Season 2, Star Trek Picard Season 3, and Star Trek Lower Deck Season 4. If you like Star Trek, we are in a new golden age. This is really, truly great Star Trek stuff that harkens back to some of its best from the original series, The Next Generation, and more. So can't express that enough. Get yourself a Paramount Plus subscription. Go dive into that. Fargo Season 5 is a return to form for a truly great dark comedy series that I think, especially more than any other, understands what Fargo is trying to be. This one's from Noah Hawley. You mentioned Loki Season 2, and then lastly, Scavenger's Reign. This is a HBO Max animated series about a stranded spaceship on a kind of on a planet that is extremely hostile to everybody. It's very harrowing, but one of my favorite animated series, maybe one of my favorite series this season of television. Didn't crack my top 3, but easily probably my top 5. Great show. Vince, you want to list out the rest of your honorable mentions?
Yeah, I've got 2. I'll go through them real quick here. The first one is One Piece, the Netflix adaptation.
No way!
Oh hell yeah, man! So I'll start this by I've never watched the One Piece anime before, and when this came out, I thought, okay, it's just a couple episodes, it's digestible. Let me give it a go. And I've watched a couple anime adaptations to live action before, and this one was actually really good. The way they handled their characters, and it goes back to the Last of Us, how it respects the source material. This one really did respect the source material quite.
How do you know you didn't watch it?
Oh well, yeah. All right, okay, fair enough. Right, yeah, I didn't watch it, but that's what people say. But it felt yeah, okay, right, fair enough. But it really the characters were great. They were fairly relatable for how animated they were acting in some points, but yeah, it was one of those you turn it on and you get to feel happy for an hour, and yeah, take it wherever you get it. Like you said, the world's on fire, so whenever you get a little piece of happiness, yeah, you take it. So that's
fair enough. I'm not to judge, but it does seem like
I did try afterwards really quickly to try watching the anime, and I only got a couple episodes in. I'm like, this is a little bit too much for me. So sorry for any One Piece anime fans.
You also have Rings of Power here. I don't need to burst your bubble, but that show came out in 2022.
Oh, did it? Okay, delete it. All right, we don't need to talk about it.
No, it's fair to mention.
Did it really?
I think, yeah, I did. I double checked.
Okay, my bad.
I actually also really liked Rings of Power, for the record. I think it's a fun show. But and I've been especially more into the Lord of the Rings stuff as of late. I would like to revisit it again, I think, before season 2 comes out. But extremely expensive. The money's on the screen. I'm a fan. I'm not gonna. I know it's not one for one with what people want out of Tolkien adaptations, but I don't think there's any way to satisfy those people. So I enjoyed it. It's just fun to be back in Middle Earth, in my opinion. So, okay, disappointments. I'll quickly mention mine. Secret Invasion, I already said, truly terrible show. The Mandalorian Season 3, I love Star Wars, but I think Mandalorian Season 3 feels like it's missing something. And I don't like it's hard to put your finger on it. It really tries to blow through, I think, a lot of story a little bit too quickly and ends on a very odd note. With the announcement of the movie coming, it makes a little bit more sense, but still a little weird. You mentioned also Secret Invasion on yours, and Mandalorian Season 3.
Yeah.
But you also didn't like What If Season 2. Did you like What If Season 1?
I did like What If Season 1. And in my overall rankings of Marvel TV, What If Season 2 does rank in the upper half, just below What If Season 1 and above Falcon and Winter Soldier. But there was just something that didn't quite capture the same magic for me that the first season did. And I don't know if that's that more of the episodes felt more interconnected, so you could really start to see this picture that they're weaving throughout season 2 a lot sooner. Maybe it was the surprise of Ultron breaking through the barrier in the first season.
That's a pretty cool moment in season 1.
Yeah. Sorry, I guess spoilers for season 1.
Yeah, I don't think it's that big.
But yeah, like there was more that surprised me, and there was more. I guess that there was more shock in season 1 too. You know, they were a little more liberal with their deaths that they allowed to have happen, and I think that the exploration that they did in the stories of season 1 really took advantage of the multiverse saga that we're in. That I wish the overall Marvel stories that are being told in movies and other TV shows took more advantage of. So
yeah, I agree.
That's
fair.
Where I left it on that.
Yep, that's totally a fair criticism, 100%. Okay, let's move over to movies because this is where things really get, I think, interesting. So same format. We'll work backwards from 3. Vince, again, as our guest, why don't you go with your number 3 film from the year 2023?
Yeah, fantastic. This one, I was looking through my list of what I watched, and Dungeons and Dragons was actually a really fun time at the movie theaters.
100% agree. I was also very close to making my top 3. I had an absolute blast with this movie in the movie theater. This is one of those examples of like not having a lot of high expectations for a movie, and then going in and just being just so pleasantly surprised and being like 100% I'd see another one of these. And I do hope there's a sequel to this movie at some point.
Me too. Yeah.
Anything else you want to add about Dungeons and Dragons?
It was just like I said, it was a really fun time. The characters, there was heartwarming, so you get a couple tear jerkers. There's like good lessons learned, and it was just as I've played a little D&D, and I can really appreciate all the references that they made, and yeah, it was great. It was a super fun time.
I think that's true. I mean, even as someone who's only played a little bit of D&D, I think what the essence that they're able to capture is kind of the silliness of it, right? It's like, this is a true D&D campaign down to the oddness of some moments where it's like, you can see that the DM is trying to get things back on track, in certain moments. And I think this is a great Chris Pine vehicle. I love Chris Pine. Yeah. One of the best Chris's, in my opinion. I know he probably gets shortchanged a lot, but I think he's great. I think he's very charming and fun to watch in this movie. Same with Michelle Rodriguez. Justice Smith is good. Hugh Grant is hilarious. I genuinely like whatever Hugh Grant is doing now. He's just kind of like, no, I'm just going to make weird movies. I'm into that. This is a fun movie. It's got a really fun cast. It's high fantasy without taking itself very seriously. It's like the spiritual opposite from a fantasy perspective of Lord of the Rings, which takes itself extremely seriously. This is like not that way, but in a good way. They managed to capture the joy and whimsy of playing D&D, and you have to give them props for that. It's very fun.
Yeah, and one thing
Um,
I'll really quickly say I wanted to say about it is the characters in it, and that each character you can think of how you're making your own character in D&D, and it really felt like each actor could have you could have imagined that each actor said was given a sheet or like, okay, make a character, and they just come up with the wildest thing
totally.
like a mage that can't do magic and like just like wild things and comes together. So I think like the character creation of each character in the movie also feels true to making a D&D character.
100%. I think this is a great example of a movie that does not deserve to be this good, but is ultimately pretty great. So this movie didn't make a ton of money, but like made enough. I think it will probably get a sequel, and I think it deserves one. It's a great movie. It's on my honorable mentions. My number three. So you're gonna notice a theme between my number three, and my number two, as they're both animated movies. But my number three is a I really struggled with this because I felt like, well, I can't have two. I don't know why. Enjoy and you know, those in the animation industry know that it's a medium, not a genre. So I shouldn't get on my own ass about this. But I was struggling with including these two, and I get here's I think, by the way, this year there were some really good movies, but I think largely speaking, this was not one of the best years for movies. There is a lot of low points this year, so I'll just put that out there. It was a little harder to pick. Number one was easy, but after that, it was not. And so my number three, and I'll explain why. My number three is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles: Mutants Mayhem, and obviously it's riffing on the Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse feel, but it feels unique enough from that to not feel just like a riff. And I love the Ninja Turtles. I think if you grew up in the late '80s and early '90s, I just don't. There's just no way you didn't have some sort of attachment to the Ninja Turtles. And if you say you didn't, I think you're a liar. I mean, like truly, I like. So there's like two people. There's only two types of people in the world: those who like Ninja Turtles in the late '80s and '90s, and liars. So this is one of the first times, because the last ones, I don't know if you guys remember, the last Ninja Turtles movies were not very good. They were produced by Michael Bay. They were live action. Their turtles looked gross and scary, and were not teenagers. And then we get this movie, and it is produced by, I think, a great Seth. What's his name? TMNT Mutant Mayhem. Ripping here as it's loading. Seth Rogen. So Seth Rogen, I think, has a sensibility that I think we all understand at this point. And it kind of works for Ninja Turtles, turns out, especially teenage ones. And so this, I think what stuck with me more than anything about this movie is its soundtrack. It's all 90s hip hop, 80s, 90s hip hop, and which kind of doesn't make sense because it's set in modern day with actual teenagers playing the turtles, which also I think is extremely endearing, by the way, to have actual teenagers, for better or for worse, because no one truly understands teenagers. They are a mystery to everyone, including themselves. But they come off so wholesome and true to life as genuine characters and not just caricatures of Leo, Raph, and all the the Ninja Turtles that we know. Right? They feel like real people, and combine that with the score, which as I said, the soundtrack, which I stuck with me for so long. I kept listening to it on Spotify over and over again. I kept telling everyone who would listen to me, go see the new Ninja Turtles movie. The music is super cool. You have Ice Cube playing the villain as Superfly, and it's like you have Seth Rogen playing Bebop. He has obviously a John Cena as Rocksteady, Rose Byrne as Leatherhead, Giancarlo Esposito as Baxter Stockman, Jackie Chan plays Splinter, Paul Rudd plays Mondo Gecko. Like, it is just a true blast. And by the way, I already mentioned but Ayo Edebiri, who's from The Bear, plays April O'Neil. And it's so cool. I just think everything about this movie is cool. The way it looks, the way it sounds, every performance, the fact that it's Ninja Turtles obviously is helpful, but it's a smash hit from my perspective. It didn't get any love from the Oscars, which I think is a shame. But I had to include this on my list. I was between this and Guardians of the Galaxy Season 3, or Volume 3, sorry. And as much as I love that movie, the Guardians movies just don't vibe with me in the long haul over time. And that's just been true of Volume 1 and Volume 2. Both good movies, but both feel not disposable, but like I don't feel the urge to revisit them. I don't have a strong attachment to them. I like them when I'm seeing them. When I'm in the moment with them, I think they're great. But give me some distance from them, and I almost forget they exist, for better or for worse. So I just feel like I couldn't do that. There's other options I could have put at 3, like Killers of the Flower Moon, The Iron Claw, Indiana Jones, The Dial of Destiny, that all were in similar kind of headspace for me. But what tipped it over was the fact that I just kept telling everyone I know, and this is not something I was doing for these other movies. I just kept telling everyone I knew to go see TMNT Mutant Mayhem, and everyone I know who followed up on that was happy that they did. So that's my pick for number 3. Have either of you guys seen this? Have seen TMNT?
No.
And you got to do it. I think it's on Paramount Plus now. So it's easy to stream at home. Vince, are you gonna strike out here for the first time?
I've hit the wall. I unfortunately have not seen as many movies this year as I have TV shows.
Fair enough.
So
fair
that
enough.
one's my first miss.
You're the opposite of Jeremy.
Yeah, it is on my list though. It is on the movie list.
You should see it. It's so fun. It's so delightful. It's hilarious. The action's great. The animation style is super compelling. Can't express TMNT Mutant Mayhem. Very good movie. Okay, Jeremy, hit me with the movie. I don't care. You don't have to put a number on it. Just hit me with something.
I only have one.
Man, you're fucking killing me here, dude. You only have one movie. Do you want to hold it, or do you want to tell me now?
Yeah, I can just wait till the end, I guess.
Okay, so you've only seen one movie all year that's worth talking about. You don't want to mention the Iron Claw. You don't want to mention.
No, you can pay the $5 and listen to the Patreon if you want.
We do like the Iron Claw. I'm gonna put the Iron Claw at Jeremy's number 3. So because he doesn't use this working document, I'm gonna put it there. So just for documentation's sake, you're not gonna put Super Mario Bros. Movie at number 3 or number 2? Come on, I know you like that movie.
I mean, if you want to fill it in, you can go ahead and do that.
What about Barbie? What about I'm trying to think of anything else you might have seen. I'm pretty sure I know what your number 1 pick is, but there's nothing else jumps out at you. You can't.
No,
you can't think of a movie.
It was a bad year for movies.
Yeah, I did say that. That's fair to say. Okay, we'll come back to you. You don't want to put The Flash? No. Okay. John Wick Chapter 4. Okay. Vince.
Hello.
Your number 2.
My number 2 ties into what you were just saying before. Guardians 3. That one's my second pick, and I did experience a little bit of fall off, like you said. The further away I got away from it, but thinking back on even all the movies in that phase, it still ranks really high in my overall Marvel phase 4 to 5. It's actually at the top of my list, beating out Spider-Man: No Way Home and Doctor Strange. I wonder if I may be ranking this too high now. I did like Spider-Man: No Way Home a little bit more than Guardians 3 now. I
just saw a video title on YouTube that said that Spider-Man: No Way Home does not age well.
It doesn't. Oh, really?
That's what I'm not saying that's what I think. I'm just saying that's what I saw YouTube saying. So, I could believe that to be true just by the fact that it relies so heavily on like the Spider-Man surprise, and I don't know how that would hold up in rewatch as well. I don't know. I think Volumes of the Galaxy Volume 3 is great because it has a strong emotional core, which is extremely important. But again, for whatever reason, they just don't stick with me like other Marvel movies do. I don't know why. But again, no, please espouse why this one works so well for you.
Yeah, I think. I think the one thing that didn't quite work for me is like I think with a lot of the Marvel movies, they're not quite sticking with their heavy beats. I don't know if I can go into spoilers of Guardians 3. Can I?
You can get into some. Yeah, I think so.
Okay,
That's fair.
okay.
Yeah.
No, no, I won't. But they pulled a pretty big punch. They made a pretty big punch right near the beginning of the movie, and I think they should have followed through all the way with it. And so that puts it on number.
You think they didn't have the stones to commit to? Interesting. I think that's a fair criticism.
Yeah.
We're ultimately dealing with Marvel or comic book movies, right? I mean,
I suppose that's true.
I don't know. I think that's a cheap, I think that's an escape hatch, to be honest. I think they should be willing to I've been saying this now for a while. The biggest thing that's missing from modern blockbusters is stakes.
Yeah.
People don't die. You're dealing with life and death situations, but no one ever dies. And because of that, everything feels weightless and pointless. And what's the most true thing in life? The only true thing in life is death, right? It's the only thing that you can 100%, what do they say? Death and taxes?
Death and taxes. Right?
So, and we're not and I guess you could say that watching these movies without any stakes is like taxing my time. But I don't know. I really do. I think you're right because what they set up at the beginning of the movie is very compelling. I don't necessarily agree that they have to follow through to make it worthwhile because there's other things that they could do to achieve that same end about stakes and all that stuff, without having to follow through on that specific plot line.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think it's a shame, just in general. This is not just a knock against Guardians of the Galaxy. It's a knock against all modern comic book movies, really.
Well, they did follow through. I would say, though, now that I've thought about it a little more, they did follow through with the Gamora storyline. She doesn't just revert
that's
back.
Interesting. Yep.
Right?
No, I think that's good.
That is something I did appreciate in the story. That they didn't try to rewrite it back to her just being back to her previous self. It was like, no, this is Gamora from 2013, and she doesn't have the same feelings and the same. No, it's really a really different person. And I think I did appreciate a lot that they didn't try to rewrite around that, and they kept that as they did it.
Yeah, I think one thing that James Gunn understands is characters, and I don't think he would ever shortcut character. And I think it's shown that he doesn't do that. We know for a fact that he was annoyed by some of the things that some of the Avengers, like the Russos, did with some of his characters from Guardians, and that he felt like weren't true to character and those kinds of things. It's part of the reason I think that I'm excited about what he's going to potentially do with the DCU. Mm-hmm. Is because I think he does understand character, and so I'm hoping that translates through to that. Jeremy, did you see Guardians of the Galaxy 3 Volume 3? I feel like you did for some reason.
No, I didn't.
No, okay, I didn't imagine that. Here's the thing. I think he makes good movies. James Gunn makes good movies. I think people who are worried that he's going to start making bad movies all of a sudden need to have some patience. I think it's going to be fine. Okay. Moving on, then. We will go to my number 2. My number 2 is Across the Spider-Verse. Again, another animated movie, and in a very similar style. You could say that those movies are too similar. I could say that this is my list, and I don't care what you have to say. So Across the Spider-Verse is a very compelling sequel to the first one. Into the Spider-Verse is one Best Animated Film that year at the Oscars. I think this movie has the potential to win. The sequel has the potential to win that same award this year at the Oscars. The problem is that the third movie is probably years away, which is a problem. And that there's all sorts of potential problematic things going on at the studio. But we're going to talk about this movie specifically. I put it above TMNT Mutant Mayhem, and I really was switching these back and forth. And the reason I put it at number 2 and not number 3 is because this movie has such a strong emotional core. It really understands what what works in this family dynamic, and because again, I think that's important to mention here. There's a strong family dynamic. Peter Parker has Aunt May, and that's nice. What Miles Morales has is a full family that he has an attachment to. It's a very different dynamic, and because of that, they have the opportunity to explore how he responds and interacts with his father, who's a cop, but also his mother. And Luna Velez, Luna Lauren Velez, who plays Rio Morales, his mother, has this standout scene where he's talking to Miles about him going off into the world and being his own man, and how she just wants him to be happy and people to accept him. And it's one of the most heart-wrenching moments I've saw on screen all year. It's not even close. And that emotional through line is maintained throughout the whole movie. And that's including as you start adding more characters and you start getting more complex with the whole multiversal stuff, which was already there, but Oscar Isaac's Miguel O'Hara as Spider-Man 2099 is this really great anti-hero / villain character who kind of plays this intermediary between the true quote-unquote villain of the series in Spot, and Spot's played by Jason Schwartzman, who crushes it. It's so funny. Like, the thing is about this movie is it's hilarious, it is emotional, it has strong relationships, the individual characters are well understood and fleshed out, their interpersonal dynamics are compelling, they're not rote. There are unexpected things that happen in this movie and decisions that people make that you might disagree with, but you understand why they would make these decisions. You have Haley Steinfeld's Gwen Stacy, and I think she, as Spider-Gwen, is one of the best Spider characters we've seen on screen for a long, long time, years. And she's also in the MCU. She's also Hawkeye's protege. I actually think she's growing to become one of the better actors out there right now. And Shamik Moura's Miles is still great, obviously growing on the original performance. I could just continue to go down here and just name all the actors and all the great work they're doing, but I will. Mahershala Ali, Uncle Aaron, he appears in this again. He was obviously in the first movie. There are Jack Quaid, by the way, as another another version of Spider-Man in this movie. Jack Johnson as another version of Spider-Man. Peter B. Parker from again the first movie continues to evolve. All these characters have evolved since the first movie. They feel like they are, again, real people. This is something that I've been coming back to a lot today. But these movies that don't treat their characters like caricatures, like paper thin, do this and do that because the script says so, but their actions feel motivated by their own internal conscience and their own thoughts and feelings and desires, and all these characters have that, despite there being so many of them. And that's on top of the, again, unbelievably compelling animation style that continues to be impressive even in its second go round, and even with derivatives like TMNT. And I say that sounds like like I'm deriding it, but it's so interesting to be able to bring the page, the comic book page, to life on a screen, but also pay homage to the still image, the drawn images that we see and love from the comic books. It's this perfect blend between the two. And live action's great. I love live action Spider-Man, but this is almost better because it allows you to really truly experience Spider-Man in the imaginative way that people had and have seen it in their own heads when they were writing it and they were drawing it. So, yeah, I love this movie. I can't wait for the third one, and I have concerns about the development of it. I mean, the stuff that they have to do to make it work. But I truly love Across the Spider-Verse. I can't say enough good things about it. Has anyone else seen this movie can back me up on this a little bit?
Yeah, man, I got you. I got you here too.
Okay, see, this is why we brought Vince in. If it was just me and Jeremy, it would have just been me talking the whole time.
Yeah, I particularly love the mother and father's relationship, like so Jeff and Rio's relationship with Miles in this movie, and I think what caught me is like the trailer caught me when Miles was like in trouble, or when he was talking with the lady at the school. It was like, I think it was the
like
advisor.
Yeah.
And just like the family dynamic, like you said, like how he interacts with his parents, and it was just it felt like, oh, this is like, it felt like a real family, and like you say, like having grounded characters that feel like real characters, not just caricatures, uh, really really elevated this movie a lot. And like Oscar Isaac's Miguel, like the character's motivation for what he's doing, doing a bad thing for a good reason, that's always a really interesting, that makes from so much more of an interesting antagonist for him being a semi-antagonist for part of the movie. And the voice acting on everything. Haley Seinfeld, of course, as Gwen Stacy was amazing.
Oh, and her opening sequence is so great. It's so cool. I everything about this movie is so cool. That's the best word I can use for it. It's just effortlessly cool.
Yeah.
To me. Yeah.
Yeah. And fun.
Super fun. Yeah.
Like,
I mean, there's heavy moments, but it's always a fun time. You're never not having a good time in this movie.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah, and I think go back to Oscar Isaac's Miguel O'Hara 2099. He's such a good character because you disagree with almost every single thing he's doing, but you understand for every second why he's doing it. And I just think that's like such a great. I mean, I know that's a factor. It's always been what makes a good villain, but this is a good example of when that's happening for real. So, all right, let's move on to Vince, your number one.
My number one, Mario Brothers.
Really? Number one? Really? Okay.
Number one, Mario Brothers. So so as a kid, when I was maybe 7 years old, I think is when my dad came home with a Nintendo and Mario Brothers 1. And so that was my very first video game ever. And the experience of playing it with my dad for hours on end in the basement on a TV, and it basically is started my entire me being a gamer because of that moment. To now have a movie that faithfully interprets the characters is just a special movie. It was just a special movie for me to finally have like a full length feature film of Mario. It was amazing.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. I will hold my comments for a second. Jeremy, I know you also saw this movie, so do you want to comment on Mario?
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of in the same boat with Vince, like pretty hyped for it for sure. And definitely excited for the future of this franchise. I think they nail so much. It just, I think it came down to the overall kind of experience for story or emotional through line wasn't necessarily like kind of there as impactful as like your typical Disney like animated movie. So I think that kind of leaves a little bit of to be desired, but I mean, it made tons of money. It's a huge success. The voice acting was great across the board, including Chris Pratt. So, yeah, no, I don't think there's anything wrong with that pick. It's
I don't know. For
Oppenheimer.
Yeah, I mean that's fair. I mean that's where we're going to go next. I think I'll just quickly mention this because again, it was on my honorable mentions. It's not in my top. It's not in my top 3. I think what's holding it back is that it's a little thin on the why any of this is happening or why any of it matters. It feels pretty weightless. There's really fun moments, but it kind of just feels like fun moments stitched with one fun moment after fun moment, and that it doesn't really have a good through line, in my opinion. So I think that's a problem. It hits all the marks and does all these cool things, but I just feel like I'd like a little bit more cohesion in my Super Mario movie. And maybe that's not a fair critique, but there's some great stuff in here. I mean, you guys mentioned like they nail the characters. I think there's so much fun. I think having Charlie Day as Luigi's an inspired choice. Jack Black as Bowser
so good.
is great. I mean, Peaches is a truly like outstanding song. Anya Taylor-Joy as Princess Peach crushes it. I think Chris Pratt's fine, but I mean, he doesn't have to really like. The thing is, it's the world that does a lot of the heavy lifting. It's not about Mario per se. So, yeah, I don't know. I think it's a great movie. It's stunningly beautiful. I think it's you have to really give it to what's the animation studio for them? It's
Illumination, I think.
Illumination, yeah, who did not less great animated movies in the past. So this is kind of like easily I think their best work. This is such a success that we're going to get a Zelda movie. We're going to get another Mario movie. We're going to get lots of other Nintendo
I'm waiting
stuff.
for the Kirby movie.
Yeah, that'll happen. I think at this point, I mean,
gotta.
this was such a success that I think anything's on the table. That in and of itself is enough to I think convince me that it's worthwhile.
And it has to culminate with a Smash Bros. Movie, right?
I don't think a Smash Bros. Movie makes any sense. I don't think you need one, to be honest. Maybe I'm alone on that, but like, what is the Smash Bros. Movie? Is it just how could it be any? We already saw what like a Mortal Kombat stuff could be. It's hard enough to do that, and that has a plot. Never mind Smash Bros, which has no plot. So that's tough. I don't know. I'm willing to entertain it, but I don't think you need it. That's my take. All right, let's talk about number one. This is my number one. This is Jeremy's number one. This is Oppenheimer. Jeremy, you jump into this because I know you are itching to get out of here. You have to work in the morning, and I know you have a baby. So, give us the tell me why this is not only your number one, but it's like number one, and everything else is a distant second or third or who knows what. We don't put numbers on it, but
yeah, it's just everyone showed up with their A game and just knocked it out of the park. Like every single performance, and obviously Nolan directing, writing, just had a masterful vision and just realized it. With the help, with the music by Ludwig, which is just incredible. Just really ties everything together. The fact that it's a true story, a massive true story, like in terms of our human history.
It changes the world. This is the biggest thing for me. It recontextualizes my understanding of the world we live in today. That there's very few movies that can do that. This one did that. I'll never forget it because it did that. I'll have more to say, but Jeremy, please continue.
Yeah, like I honestly didn't know too much, like just kind of surface level. I never really did much research on it or like learned about it. But then, yeah, just as it plays out and like just the lengths they go to, the money spent, but just even creating like the little town, like it's just so
Los Alamos.
Yeah, like it's such an unbelievable thing, but it makes so much sense. Like, you know what I mean? Just having everyone present and not having to sacrifice so much in order to get to the end goal. But then what does that mean? Like, what does that create? Like, and like Killian, obviously like there's no way he doesn't win the Oscar. Like it's
it seems unlikely, right?
It all hinges on him, like his face, his performance, and it's amazing. Like every next scene, it's like, how is this guy doing this? He just embodies a different person.
It's a long movie.
And same with Robert Downey Jr. Incredible. Just the little twitches he does, and just the emotion he portrays in his kind of villainous stance, across from Killian.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, just breathtaking movie, astonishing, really.
Yeah, I mean, so I don't want to beat the dead horse here, but I did a pilgrimage to see this movie. I went to see it in IMAX in Regina, which is a 5-hour drive from here. And that's not relatively that long. I can do a 5-hour drive to see a movie that's 3 hours long. And it was worth it. I got to see it on 70 millimeter film stock on full IMAX screen, and it did not disappoint. It's unbelievable. As I said before, it recontextualizes my understanding of the world we live in. It helps me understand why things are the way that they are. There was a time in human history, from the moment that humans crawled out of the muck up through the moment that the atom bomb was created, that was, one type of world. And then they invented the atom bomb, and now we live in that world, and that world will continue until whatever the next world-ending thing that we can create. But at another level, it's because you're dealing with the smallest possible thing, the atom. That, well, technically you can get smaller than the atom now, but for the sake of conversation, this thing that binds the universe together, if I can use Star Wars for a moment, right? And the sheer understanding of that one minuscule, tiny little thing, how it can have this impact on people, the world, the universe, our understanding of it. Some of the greatest minds of all time involved in this project, right? I think they articulate it well, right? I think ideally we'd all prefer to live in a world where we didn't have to think about the fact that the world could end at any moment due to someone having a bad day who has the power to control atomic missiles, right? But there was a moment in time where they understood that either they built it and made it, or the Nazis would. And I think, there's no greater villain in the history of the world than the Nazis. So, you can understand why they do it, but it's still every moment of the construction, creation, conception of the atom bomb feels like you are marching towards inevitable doom. I think they really create this sense of inevitability in this movie because, again, we know it's used, right? History says it was dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, right? And so we know that. And there's the debate in this movie about should it be used or shouldn't it be used and all this stuff, but that's kind of irrelevant because we know it happens. And even this kind of concept of, well, what if we destroy everything? We know that it doesn't destroy everything, but they didn't know. And because this is a true story, you are put into the shoes of these people who are taking that chance into their hands, the potential to destroy everything. And the weight of that is so brilliantly communicated in this movie. With the IMAX screen, it helps do a lot. It does a lot of heavy lifting because it makes everything feel larger than life. But the direction, the acting, specifically from Cillian Murphy, but from everyone involved, Matt Damon, Robert Downey Jr., Emily Blunt, Alden Ehrenreich. It's like, this is what an amazing cast. It goes on and on and on. All the people that show up for just a single line, but it's a story that you felt like needed to be told, but you didn't know it needed to be told this way. And then when you saw it this way, it just leaves you shaken. It's not a movie I want to ever revisit necessarily. It feels to me like almost The Last of Us, a game that I played once and I felt satisfied that I had played that game because it's so heavy. And it provided so much context to and things to think about and about your life, and this does the same thing on a massive scale. It's nominated for 13 Oscars. It's likely to win a lot of those, and I think it's deserving of all those things. Jeremy, is there anything else you'd want to add?
No, I think that's good.
All right, then, Jeremy, you are free to run. I will finish this off with Vince, and I will let you know if there's any other highlights that are worth mentioning.
Sounds good.
Okay. All right.
See you boys later. See you, Vince.
Later.
See you, man.
Anything I assume seen Oppenheimer? Anything you want to add?
This is actually one I have not seen yet.
Wow. Okay.
This and Barbie are the next two movies I'm going to go see.
That's impressive because Barbenheimer was such a
I know,
right?
it just hit me at like just the right moment where like I just wasn't going to the movie theaters for a while, and I don't know what it was that I didn't go see it. I often go to I go to the movies alone a lot, and I definitely could have just gone one day. But what I will say about Oppenheimer is something you touched on earlier, is that like there was, like you say, this moment of time before and after the atom bomb, and I don't think I ever really thought about it that our entire lives, like I was born in
Our entire lives,
1987,
yeah.
that like it's always just always this threat of instant death
I don't think we
has
think about it, but it's
always,
there. It's there.
yeah, it's
And
always been there.
yeah, and it makes you aware of it again, and it's not a nice feeling.
No.
I don't care for it. I got to be honest. I am not a fan of nuclear proliferation. I would prefer if we all agreed. And in fact, this movie touches on a time and place where they felt like if everyone knew about how to build a nuclear bomb, then at least we're safe because no one would destroy everyone, right? That mutually assured destruction would be the solution. But there was a time when they didn't want that to be the case, where the Americans should be the only ones who knew how to build it. And the people who released that secret were tried for treason. So, I this is one of maybe the heaviest story. I mean, the Iron Claw is a pretty heavy movie. It was a lot of tragedy, but it's personal tragedy. This is like taking that times 1,000 and thinking about the consequences to the world, and it's very upsetting. I don't. Again, I said I don't care for it. I really would prefer to not live in a world where we live under the threat of nuclear armaments at any given moment. So not that specific piece. I think, and I think specifically for us who've never lived in a world. I think most people who there are certainly people who are alive still who remember this stuff, but not many. And almost everyone in the world today, a vast majority, has lived under the threat of nuclear war their entire life. And it's hard to quantify what that means or how that affects everybody on a daily basis. But I think it does. I think it does have an impact. I think it does dictate how people live their lives and the decisions they make at some subconscious level.
I think so too. I think it's, yeah, like you say, it's hard to tell exactly what that is, but I'm sure, yeah, but there's got to be some kind of impact. But
yeah. Anyway, it's a great movie, and worth it if you ever had the chance. If you did get to, if you ever have the chance again, because I think it's being reshown in certain IMAX theaters. If you ever have the chance to see it in a true IMAX theater in 70mm film print, do yourself a favor. Do whatever you can to go see it.
Now, I can ask you this question. Should I watch Barbie first, then Oppenheimer, or Oppenheimer, then Barbie?
I think you watch Oppenheimer first and then decompress with
Do
Barbie.
palate cleanse after?
Yeah, yes. Yeah. I did it the other way, but I kind of wish I hadn't. I wish I'd seen Barbie second. I really love, by the way, Barbie's on my honorable mentions. I think it's a really fun movie. Hilarious, has strong messages. It takes a extremely difficult adaptation concept and makes it work, largely speaking. And so I have nothing against Barbie. I do understand people have gripes about some of the Oscar stuff. We'll talk about that more in our Oscar preview show. But I don't think it stands a chance against Oppenheimer from an Oscar perspective. It's a great movie, but it's not winning Best Picture. It's really fun, and I think it's so fun that they're so starkly different, and they came out on the same day, and it created this big thing. I think the Oppenheimer phenomenon was great for movies. I think it's hard to replicate. I think it's pretty unique of a moment, and that it's unlikely that you're going to see something like that happen again anytime soon. I think you'll see people try to make it happen, and it'll feel forced and phony, and it won't work the same. What made it work was that it was organic. There was like, oh, who's going to move? And they're like, no, neither of us are going to move. We feel like we're different enough movies that we don't need to compete. And you know what? That experience, the rising tide lifts all boats. It was a smashing success. Okay, so let's list out a few more honorable mentions. I mentioned Dungeons and Dragons. We talked about that already. Asteroid City. This is a Wes Anderson movie, the Wes Anderson movie of the year. He seems to be doing one every year almost these days. I love Wes Anderson. It's delightful. This is one of the more difficult to approach Wes Anderson movies. I think it's very abstract, and it kind of flips things inside out. Did you see Asteroid City?
I did watch it. It felt like I was watching one of those movies your teacher would put on in high school and say, "Okay, now write an essay about what this means."
Yeah, I think if someone asked me to write an essay about what Asteroid City means, I think I'd have a hard time. I think it's not to say that it's too complicated. I just think that it doesn't do itself a lot of favors in terms of its how it. I think it has big ideas, but the way it addresses those big ideas, I think, is a little bit too, as I said, abstracted to make it really impactful. I think it gets lost in the shuffle a little bit because of that. I think there's great performances. I love the. I mean, every time. The thing is, Wes Anderson gets great performances out of actors because it's about the dialogue and a very specific acting style, and certain actors are really good at that. And it's fun to be and see that stuff. For me, Grand Budapest Hotel is still by far my favorite Wes Anderson movie. I think it's the most complete experience from Wes Anderson film perspective for my money. Asteroid City does not reach those heights for me, but I will say, alongside Asteroid City on Netflix, he did a bunch of Roald Dahl shorts, and Roald Dahl has a natural connection with Wes Anderson. In fact, the Roald Dahl estate is kind of single-handedly provided Wes Anderson like the keys to the kingdom. He can do whatever he wants with that material because there's that natural kind of relationship there. And he does a bunch of them. They're all on Netflix. These short films, if you're looking for just a little punch of Wes Anderson, it's a great way to do it. And Roald Dahl, hard to beat in terms of source material to work off of. So mention that as well. I don't know if you saw any of those.
No, I haven't.
You should go search those out if you like Wes Anderson. It's worth it. Also mention Super Mario Bros. Also on my honorable mentions. Indiana Jones and Dial of Destiny. I think this is a very fun Indiana Jones movie. Very, very capable. I like the sci-fi twist that they apply to this. I think they have compelling villain here, and I think Harrison Ford is putting in pretty good performance. I genuinely think this is a really fun Indiana Jones movie that hits on a lot of the highs of previous Indiana Jones movies. The thing is, Harrison Ford's quite old now, so it's hard to do the same stuff. And they do it. There's a flashback sequence where they do a de-aged thing. I think it's pretty compelling. It's pretty fun.
Yeah, I thought it worked for me.
Yeah, I don't know. I truly don't know. I don't think there is a way to people who are like true, the biggest Indiana Jones fans of Raiders and Last Crusade and that stuff. There's no recapturing that. So what's the next best thing? This. I think it's so good. I really like it. I don't understand I don't get what people want. This is another thing that I have with Star Wars right now. It's like, what do you want? I don't get it because this is fun stuff with the characters you like. And by the way, fun new characters. Some of them I feel a little bit maybe, if I can provide a gripe, feel a little derivative of some previous Indiana Jones characters that we've had in the past. But I think here it works for me. The mystery's fun, the gimmick is fun, the twist is fun, the acting is good. I don't know. It's a winner for me. Killers of Flower Moon. This is a 3+ hour movie from Scorsese. Scorsese's still fucking great, so you can't really complain there. The movie's long. That is, I think, a gripe that anyone can say. I think Scorsese.
I've never run up to a long movie and be like, oh man, I wish this was shorter. I enjoy long form, even like TV shows and stuff. Like, I think it's because I'm just rebelling against the 23-minute Marvel TV shows.
Oh yeah,
I'm just like, okay, no, just give me as much as possible. I'll just take it all in.
It did feel like they were like the Marvel shows not only were short in episodes, but the episodes themselves. This is also true with some of the Star Wars shows.
Yes.
Give your show some time to breathe. What is the rush? I don't like that. That's a fair critique. But Killers of the Flower Moon takes its time, and Scorsese's comment is like, listen, if you got to go to the bathroom, fine, go and watch it again, like, or watch it at home. There's like who cares? Like, I think it's a fair comment from him. This is a much better movie than his last one, which was direct to Netflix, I think. And it has, I don't know. I don't need to beat this to death. Everyone who's seen this movie, I think, probably pretty much likes it. It's obviously nominated for Best Picture. I don't want to get into it. There's lots to unpack with The Killers of the Flower Moon. It's not in my top 3, and it is certainly in probably my top 5. It'd probably be slotted around 5, I'm guessing. It's a really compelling story. It's a story I didn't know, also based on a true story. You have Leo putting in a really interesting performance as not the lead. He is a lead, but he's not the lead here. And I don't know. I think it does overstay its welcome a little bit. A little bit of trimming might not have hurt the movie. Again, we just got over saying it doesn't matter if it's too long, but I think it has one of the best I will say this: it has one of, if not the best trailer I saw all year, with some of the best like intercutting with music and stuff. It's really cool.
Oh.
But as a complete movie, it's very satisfying. It's quite dark. It's a little upsetting. Well, more than a little upsetting. But it feels like a gangster movie set in a time before the gangsters that we're used to from Scorsese even existed. And because of that, I think he's kind of playing with house money and is able to explore these characters in a whole different way. You have De Niro here playing a character he doesn't normally play. You have Leo playing a character he doesn't normally play. And then you have newcomers to this movie who I obviously, again, also nominated. Lily Gladstone, who plays Molly Burkhart, is nominated for Best Actress. Totally worth it. Jesse Plemons is here. Jesse Plemons is quickly becoming one of my favorite actors, so anytime he appears, it's always worthwhile. John Lithgow, and obviously, again, I mentioned De Niro and Leonardo DiCaprio. So, great cast. You get to spend a lot of time with these characters. It's not a huge cast in terms of you're not spending a lot of time with a lot of side characters, but you do get to spend a lot of time with Leo and De Niro and Lily, and because of that, Scorsese knows how to shoot a movie. You get to see the emotions on these people's faces, and the how they have to deal with these really bullshit situations, and the coldness and the callousness of these people to take advantage is upsetting and gross. But that's what the point of the movie is. So again, I think it's a great movie. No doubt there. Guardians of the Galaxy 3 we mentioned already, and then Iron Claw. As Jeremy said, go listen to our review. I think it's worth it. It's really fun. So okay, my disappointments. The Flash. I think that's not a surprise. That movie's garbage. There's some good moments. Speaking of like father, parents and their kids moments. The moments between the Flash and his mom that we get in this movie are pretty good. But and the Flash and his dad are also pretty good. But everything else is pretty much useless. And Ezra Miller is not a leading man in my opinion. So that's beyond all the kind of extracurricular stuff that we already know with him. That makes this even more problematic. But it also feels like this movie's been cut and reshot a million times. It feels like it's got studio fingerprints all over it. It relates to another theme of mine that I wanted to mention quickly, which is that the continuing trials and tribulations of the Warner Brothers studio, and after their merger with Discovery, it just keeps getting worse. Like whether it's the Batgirl movie being shelved, or now The Flash, or Aquaman 2, which I actually thought was a pretty fun movie, but didn't perform, and for obvious reasons. So I plus it's got all this gross like reviving these dead actors for these performances that don't need to be. It's like it's really weird, and so it's got a lot of problems. and even the reintroduction of a Batman that I think all have fondness for does not save this movie, and it's a massive disappointment. Did you see it? Did you see The Flash?
I did. And speaking of that particular Batman, it felt a lot to me the way Luke Skywalker did when he got reintroduced in the later movies, where he's just this curmudgeonly old man and doesn't really care, and it's like, oh man, it just kind of pops your bubble of who you always thought that version of Batman was, kind of thing. And so I was
Well,
like,
I'm upset that you used the Luke Skywalker example because I love the Luke from The Last Jedi, and especially for the exact reason that you mentioned, which is it makes him a real person and not a icon. And I think that it's hard to. It's like, okay, well, this character's become an icon, so now what? Right? It's hard to tell a story with that character. So I understand what they had to do in that scenario, and no love lost for Rian Johnson. I think that movie's great, but I know that a lot of the people disagree. But I think you're right. I mean, this Batman just does not have it. It's from a different era. Doesn't really fit into the world that they've established here with the old DCEU, and it's a shame because I think there's a lot of interesting things you could do with that dynamic, but they don't capitalize on it. And not only that, we had a really great interpretation of the Flash on television with Grant Gustin. Grant Gustin. That
yes.
I think gets completely, not overshadowed because that show stands on its own, but overlooked by this movie in such a kind of an insulting way. I think, especially dealing with the multiverse theme and concept that we got here. So yeah, Michael Keaton's Batman, he's too old for this part, A, to play an actual Batman, and B, why is Batman even in this movie? So that's on top of the cringy humor that Ezra Miller's bringing to this, and there's some endearing moments, but I think overall, it's a complete disaster. So okay, so your honorable mentions.
Yeah,
looks like you only have one.
I have one, and it is Aquaman 2, and I'll tell you why it is Aquaman 2, because this movie got, at some point, I don't know if it was how it was pitched to me, but I heard it described as a buddy cop movie between Aquaman and Orm, the villain from the previous movie, who's Aquaman's brother. And something about that, just like, that works for me.
Did that dynamic come across to you on the screen? I didn't.
Yeah.
I didn't feel that.
I thought it worked really well for me. I really enjoyed it.
I did like their dynamic, but I didn't feel like it was a buddy cop dynamic, I guess is my...
Yeah, maybe not so buddy cop, but it was like the straight guy, the straight-laced guy, and then there's like the wild guy, and
right.
Orm's kind of playing the straight-laced guy, and...
Yeah, and also Jason Momoa is obviously, we know his shtick. It's like over-the-top, silly stuff. So he's really cool, though. I think I love this movie for a similar reason, but for me, it's because it's a fucking cartoon. It's a true cartoon. There are villains with a layer and the henchmen wearing matching uniforms and stuff. I do feel bad for what's his name in this movie, Randall Park, who is really like burdened with a kind of unfair role to take on. It's like you have to play a henchman who has a larger role than every other. You have to wear these stupid outfits. You have it's like, I don't know. It's a thankless job. I think he does a good job with it, all things considered. But it's not great. I think Aquaman 2 is so much fun. I think it's a well deserved sequel to the first movie, which I think is also a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm.
But it may be probably too silly for most people. I think is the ultimate takeaway. It's full of it's a heavy-handed climate change allegory with essentially Dr. Evil style cartoon layer situation going on.
Mm-hmm.
There's all sorts of weird stuff like Mira's barely in the movie, and you know why, because of all the behind the scenes stuff.
That was a little bit. That felt it was pretty pretty notable.
I mean, I just like, and I don't really even care because I just like, I don't have that much of a strong attachment to that character. But, you could just see all those things on the screen, like a lot of reshoots and I think it looks really cool though. I think it has a great visual style. I think Jason Momoa does a great job as Aquaman. I think the suit looks really cool. It just gets so great, like it's so over the top. There needs to be more movies that are like this. Like this movie, Aquaman 2, should not exist. It costs too much money. It's absolutely ridiculous of a concept, and starring a character that's been widely derided as being too silly, also even from the comic books, and it makes it work. I don't know. I mean, it has no reason to exist. It doesn't deserve to exist, but it does, and I'm happy it does. So I agree with you on that front.
Last thing I'll say about it is it just whenever a movie can hit me in the heartstrings, it'll get a passing grade for me. And right near the end, I guess spoilers for Aquaman 2.
Mm-hmm.
Can we do that?
The end of the DCEU, by the way, also.
Yeah. We can talk about the last scene if we want to, but I'll generalize it. When Aquaman and Orm are holding this trident, and Aquaman's giving this like really heartfelt speech to his brother, and like me, I have a brother, and that just like, oh man, it's like you're not alone in this world. You're not alone in this. And it's like, oh man, that hit me good. That hit me good. And that's,
right. Hey man, no disrespect. That's cool. I'm happy for you. Okay, so mention the last scene. Tell us what happens in the very final scene.
Oh yes, okay. So our very final scene in the DCEU is, of course, Orm picking up a cockroach and stuffing it in his burger and eating it and having a little smile on his face, right?
Yeah,
of course,
hilarious.
Of course.
Well, I think it's so funny that he tricks him into eating cockroaches in the first place. I think.
Yeah, and so like for Orm, for the character, like, oh yeah, this is my brother told me this was good and it wasn't so bad, and like, yeah, smile on his face. But of course, like the meta joke of it all is like, this is the last scene in the DCU.
But they didn't know that when they shot that, so it's like you can't really hold it against them.
Yeah.
Okay, so your disappointments. You have the Flash here, but you also have one that I also have, which is Rebel Moon Part 1. What a not a full movie is what that is. It's not a full movie. I understand it's Part 1, but like it feels so disjointed as a film. It's so weird to me.
It's like maybe it was like the product of how I ended up watching that movie, which was, again, I think it was only on Netflix, so it was only in my upstairs computer. So whenever I was, having lunch and at my computer or something like that. So I did watch it. Ended up in like, I think 3 separate sittings. But like it kind of felt just like I understood the story and what it was trying to do, but it's just something about it that like didn't hook me. Where it's like, where a space story should. And I love space stories, and there's just something about it that just wasn't quite clicking for me.
Yeah, it's supposed to be like Zack Snyder's Star Wars.
Yeah.
I don't think it ever even approaches the heights of Star Wars, really. There's an R-rated version that's supposed to be coming that's longer to Netflix soon. I will give that a shot because this version feels so oddly cut together, like they're cutting around things that should be there. And the characters, I talk about needing full, how great it is to have fully fleshed out characters. There's nothing approaching a fully fleshed out character in this movie. They are all paper thin. I don't know anything about these people, ultimately, right?
Yeah.
We get the most basic concept of who these people are and what the world, like the larger world. And you could make the argument that that's true for Star Wars: A New Hope, but there you get a much more fully realized understanding of who those characters are in that movie than you get in this, especially the villain, where it's like, could they be more comically evil?
Mm-hmm.
No. I mean, the answer is no. So I mean, like
they hit the max.
Yeah, exactly. It's full on cartoon character level. So I wanted to like this movie. I think Zack Snyder is an amazing visual storyteller. I think he struggles very mightily with storytelling and character, especially character. I don't think he gets characters, and I think so. He would benefit a lot from having a strong script partner who does get that stuff. Because if he has a strong script, I think he can tell a strong movie. But if he's writing this stuff like he did here, oh man, it is it's a mess. It's not good.
Yeah.
Again, I'm willing to give it. Maybe it's like he designed it or thought of it as a rated R thing, and now the first version is PG-13. I don't even know why they did that. Just release the version that was his original vision to begin with. Like what it's trying to recreate this whole Snyder Cut thing inorganically, and it feels forced. So yeah, no, it's not great. And then okay, your last disappointment is Ant-Man Quantumania. What specifically disappointed you about that movie?
I think the loss of the potential of that movie, what that movie could have been and what it didn't end up doing, I think is what disappointed me the most. Like I think Kang was a great villain in that movie. I think the way
unfortunately Jonathan Majors is not.
Yes.
It's not good, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, good actor. Really liked him in everything I saw him in. But
good actor, terrible person.
Terrible person, and now you have to fix it.
Yeah.
And puts
I mean,
all. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe not the biggest loss, considering.
It feels like recasting in this situation is just such like the obvious answer. Like it's the multiverse. Like we've already seen different versions of the same person in Spider-Man.
Yeah, that's fair. That's a good point, actually. That's a great point. I think that's probably what they'll do. And there's lots of ways to make it work. They have options. Certainly. I largely agree. It feels a little hollow. I want to like this movie more. I saw it in Raleigh, and I got to see it at a Alamo Draft House, and I love seeing movies there. It's like my own little pilgrimage, and unfortunately, as a whole, it feels just pretty disposable. And it's supposed to set up this. It's supposed to have this like Avengers style stakes, but it doesn't really have the characters to carry that. So I don't know. I agree. It's not. It's I do like the movie. I enjoy it, but I just think it is a disappointment. That's the only way to look at it. Right?
Yeah.
It does not hit the heights that it's trying to achieve. And was not the beginning, but certainly the first major sign that things were not as they should be in the Marvel world.
I think part of it too is it's another instance of them pulling their punches where Ant-Man should have died. For sure, hands down.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
Like I firmly believe
or
that
literally anybody could have died. That would.
Yeah, really, yeah. But like this was supposed to set up basically the next Thanos level threat, and he should have won in this movie, at the very least, like achieved whatever kind of goal he was trying to achieve. Get his chair and get out, and then that would have gotten the other Kangs, the Council of Kangs, to be like, oh, that Kang is out, time to kick it into high gear, and now you start to have this invasion of Kangs, and that can kind of kick off like this more multiversal war.
Or you could have left Ant-Man and their team trapped in the quantum realm, and for all intents and purposes, they're dead to the other because they don't know how to get to them or whatever. So there's a lot of options that they had there. I think you hit the nail on the head, which is that Kang lost too many times in his introduction, both in Loki and in Ant-Man and the Wasp. So he becomes less of a compelling villain when he's constantly losing. This is a problem with Star Wars also has with some of its villains when they're losing constantly. So it's like, why should we care about these people at all? Because they seem extremely ineffectual. So anyway, I think I largely agree with you. But we've been going on too long, so let's wrap it up here. I had a few things that I wanted to mention as a part of trends and topics from the last year. I'll try to blend those into the upcoming or future Tower Babble podcast episodes. So stay tuned for those. I'm not going to spoil it, but I think we hit on a lot of them. The one thing we didn't really talk about too much, writer strike, the actor strike, that was a big impact over the last year. We're going to feel it much more this year next, as those kind of the ripple effect from that. And the slow death of physical media, which is something we've been talking about for a while. So those are all going to be on tap anyway. But that is to say, that is a wrap on the 7th annual Tobie Awards. Thank you, as always, for listening. The Tobies is something we get excited about every year. I certainly enjoyed making this episode. I hope you enjoyed listening to it. We will be back very soon with more TOB. There's going to be as I said, Dune. I don't think maybe I didn't mention this. We're going to be doing Dune for our next film club for next month, just in time for Dune Part 2 coming up March 1st. So stay tuned for that. That's on the Patreon, patreon.com/TowerBabblecast. If you have thoughts, comments about anything that we talked about today, hit me up on Twitter @TowerBabblecast, facebook.com/TowerBabblecast, or send us an email, towerbabblepodcast@gmail.com. But, as I said, we've already talked too much. So I'll end it right here. Thank you for listening. We'll be talking to you very soon. Take care.